Yeah, so hello everyone, welcome to today's video. Today we are continuing videos on Agile series. Yesterday we talked about Kanban, and today we're going to discuss about extreme programming, which is one of the most powerful Agile engineering technique, right? This particular picture gives an overall idea about XP. In XP, you generally start with planning. It's called planning game, where you create user stories along with acceptance criteria and its value. So iteration plan is being done. Then you do the simple design, if required a spike solution, and then coding, refactoring, and you might do pair programming for your coding, and you might do continuous CI/CD, during your implementation, and then acceptance testing and release, right, where the project velocity is computed, right? So software increment is done here. It's a very small release, right? You can consider that as an iteration or a sprint where everything is done, planning, design, coding, testing is done and being released. So the important thing is the practices here, right? The iteration plan, planning game is a practice, refactoring, pair programming, continuous integration, right? Customer testing, all those are essential practices of XP, right? So you run this iteration, repeat this iterations similar to sprint execution, in Scrum, right? In XP we are talking about 12 practices. The inner layer talks about the core engineering practices like test driven development, refactoring, simple design, and pair programming. And the next layer, second layer, talks about team level practices like collective ownership, continuous integration, system metaphor, sustainable phase, coding standard, right? These are team level practices. And the outer layer talks about planning game, small releases, customer test, whole team, right? It's more of planning and releasing kind of strategies in the outer layer, right? The core layer talks about individual engineering practices, the second layer talks about team level practices, and third layer talks about the planning and execution strategy of XP. We will discuss each one in detail. We need to understand certain concepts like technical debt here, because in my opinion XP brings a lot of technical excellence to the table. It brings a lot of engineering discipline to the table, right? It also advocates for self-organizing teams. So we understood one of the principles of Agile is that the best architecture design emerges from a self-organizing team. So XP has a lot of value addition in terms of engineering discipline and technical excellence. If you want to have very less technical debt, right? When we looked at the difference, one of the advantages between waterfall and agile is that decreasing technical debt as we move on in the agile projects. But what happens in the waterfall is the technical debt is increasing, right? So what is a technical debt? It is an implied cost of additional rework caused by choosing an easy limited solution instead of using a better approach that would have taken a longer period of time, right? Giving a workaround, as simple as that. Giving a workaround when the customer is putting a pressure on you, giving some workaround, providing some hot fixes, and without even writing a full code, well designed code and deliver it, right? That's create and rework, additional rework that has an implied cost to it. So technical debt is coined by Watt Cunningham, it's one of the founders of agile programming. The extra development work required when imperfect code is implemented in the short term, right? That's called technical debt, right? So you cannot do this often actually. You cannot implement a bad code, that's going to work for a short term. It will create a lot of technical debt. So technical debt, it all has different categories like documentation debt, compliance debt, design debt, architectural debt, code debt, defect debt, testing debt, automation debt, people debt. All these called technical debt. You may have errors in any areas, right? See, what are the general common causes of technical debt? Business pressures, giving some workaround immediately, tightly coupled components, lack of test suite, delayed refactoring, poor technical leadership. These are some of the causes for technical debt. Right? So you need to plan accordingly. You need to use simple practices like simple design, common code, and ownership, something like that to avoid this. Right? The second important concept in XP is an emergent architecture or a simple design. Look at that, as we move on in the sprints or iterations, you spend a lot of time in architectural code. This white space is architectural code, and if you move on into the sprint, you'll spend less time on the architectural code, and then you'll spend a lot of time on functional code, right? That's how the architecture evolution happens. Just enough architecture that is required for the particular design, a particular sprint, and move on and incrementally design it, right? That's how the emergent architecture works. That's called incremental design by refactoring, right? So incremental design by refactoring must be supported by automated and continuous integration tools and test-driven development. Very, very important that you need to have test-driven development and CI/CD in place, automation in place to have incremental design, right? So design, instead of happening upfront, it occurs continuously, right? So similar to the emergent architecture, the design also emerges continuously. The refactoring is an improving structural design without changing behavior, right? So in improving a structural design without changing the behavior and testing that has been changed, right? So you have to, the way you want to improve the code, right? So you can do something like indexing, you can do something like reusing of your existing classes or existing methods. It's called refactoring. That's called improving the structural design. You make it lightweight code, right? That's called as refactoring, right? Let's understand what is TTD. TTD has 5 steps, right? One of the important aspects in XP is the test-driven development. You write automation test, right? So you write a test in, let's say that you are developing a code in Java, right? For a particular functionality. First, you need to write a test, automated test, to make sure that all the cases are fails. Run all the testers and observe the failures. That's the second step. And third is the write code to pass test. So this is where you start writing the coding here. The TTD differs in first 2 steps, writing an automated test and run all the tests and observe the failures, right? Using your Eclipse and other mechanisms in Java, and then you start writing. This is where you write the Java code here. Actually, this is also Java code only, but that's for for our test action. It's called unit test actually. Then run all the tests and observe pass, and then refactor as necessary. So these are the 5 steps involved in test-driven development. Right? I took this picture from Scaled Agile. Right. So this again they're explaining this. So one of the important things is in test-driven development leads to highly cohesive, loosely coupled classes and good design action. Right? You write test and run test, right? And then it passes and you go with the refactoring and everything. If it's not passes, change the code and functionality. So that's how it works, right? So agree and build an automated test, then build a system code to exercise it, and then amend and refactor if necessary, right? Right. So let's get into other practices of XP. The third one is the planning game, right? Planning game is a plan for the iteration releases. This is the main thing that occurs beginning of the iteration cycle, as we see in the first slide, right? The development team and customer get together to discuss and approve of product features. At the end of the planning game, the developer plan for upcoming iteration and release, assigning tasks for each of them, right? So self-organizing teams, they'll assign by themselves. Then we should have an on-site customer to well-run XP teams, right? So according to XP, the end customer should fully participate in development. The customer should be present all the time to answer team questions, set priorities, and resolve disputes if necessary. right? So you need to have customer on site. Either you can take your team to the customer side, or you can take the customer to your site. But continuous presence of a customer for clarifying questions, set prioritization, right? It's very, very important. Pair programming, one important concept in XP. So this practice requires two programmers to work jointly on the same code. The first developer focus on writing, the second developer focus on reviewing the code, suggesting the improvements, refactoring, fixing the mistakes along the way, right? So generally it takes 15% more time when you work on, two people on the same code. It might take 15% more time, and then but it results in a high quality software. So because it takes 15% or more time, it is more reasonable to try pair programming for a long-term projects, as it advised. Right. The next one is a code refactoring we already discussed. It is a goal of this technique is to continuously improve the code. Refactoring is about removing redundancy, eliminating unnecessary function, increasing code coherency, and at the same time decoupling the elements. So keep your code simple and clean so that everyone can understand and modify it when required. Right? That's where when you have a good refactored code, easy to have a collective common ownership. Is to have good to have system metaphor together. Right? So it's about continuously improving the code. Keep your code simple and clean. Keep it very coherent. Remove the redundancies and everything. Continuous integration, right? So developers always keep the system fully integrated. They commit the code multiple times in a day, which is also called continuous delivery, right? CI/CD. Nowadays we are using a DevOps is along with the agile practice, very very important. So this continuous integration only evolved as DevOps today, right? Small releases. So as we say that in sprint, right, we talk about sprint goal, right? Maybe on every sprint on sprint. So similarly, XP suggests releasing minimum viable product quickly, actually, right? So further developing the product by making small and incremental updates. So small releases allow developers to frequently receive feedback, right? The next is a simple design. The best approach to create code only for the features you are implementing, while you search for enough knowledge to reveal the simplest design. You create a code just for the features you are implementing. Just design for that. Then refactor incrementally the implement new understanding the design. Right? There's an emergent design, incremental design, all this is the same concept, simple design. Right? Coding standards, very very important practice in XP. Your team must have a common set of coding practices. It is even available when we had a waterfall as well, but it's very strictly followed in XP to have a common set of coding practices, right? So code written according to the same rules encourages the collective ownership, right? Using the same format, styles of naming convention of the methods and everything. Standard set of coding practices, right? So let's discuss about the final three practices in XP. Is a collective code ownership. The practice declares that whole team's responsibility for a design of a system. So entire team member owns every bit of the code. It's not about having a silos that one person knows one component, other person knows other component. It's not like that. So XP encourages team to cooperate more and feel free to bring new ideas. It's very important to have the collective ownership to encourage the team to have a free to bring new ideas, so everybody can deal the situation when somebody is not available. Easy to have collective ownership. It really helps to managing your risk as well. All right, the final practice is system metaphor design stands for simple design, right? There are two steps involved. One is it's a design and structure must be understandable to the new people, right? So you need to have a system metaphor where you talk about your core practices, you talk about your design practices, and the entire design and structure should be understandable to the new people, right? So where you explain your collective code ownership, where you explain your coding standards and systems for the person coming into the team need to easily understand, right? That's very important function in the system metaphor. The second is the naming of the classes and methods should be coherent, right? That's about understanding. All right, the final expectation from XP is 40 hours of work, right? The optimal number of work hours must not exceed 45 hours of work. That's an important aspect to make sure that team is feel well and rested, right? You cannot sustain, you cannot ask the team for 12 hours, 15 hours every day for continuously for 3 months or 6 months is not sustainable. So with that, we have come to a conclusion of today's video on extreme programming. You got a very brief and concise and a nice idea on XP. How do I implement it? So the way I implement it in my organization is XP is for all the development projects. I had XP in the engineering layer and I wrapped up with the Scrum. So we are following Scrum XP for all the development projects. So see, for operations, actually we use Kanban for engineering and wrap it up with Scrum. We follow Scrumban. So in my personal opinion, being an agile coach, with the current company, I feel that a Scrum is unavoidable for for your management practices, your team level organizing practices. Scrum is kind of indispensable in my opinion. And definitely you need to have XP and Kanban and a lean kind of practices in engineering. There is also very important to have these engineering practices. You should be able to, as an agile leader, you should be able to appreciate the difference between agile engineering and agile management layers. So Scrum will help you in more of agile management layer. Then XP and Kanban kind of practices will help you in engineering layer, right? So you need to blend them, bring them a hybrid mode so that you can get the best out of the both worlds, right? Right. So you got a nice view on XP today, right? Hope you like this video, right? So let me know if you have any improvement ideas on your views. I would like to listen from you. Thanks a lot for your time today. I would appreciate your time. Thank you. Bye bye.